God made the world and all its wonders for man to explore. And there are countless wonders just outside your front door. Now join natural world photographer and journalist Roger W. Downs as he shares the stories of the people, places, music, and cuisines he has discovered as we explore with RWD.
Hey, welcome on in. I'm Roger W. Downs, your host of Explore with RWD. And this time, we're not going to go too far away from my home base out of Fletcher, North Carolina, just south of here to Brevard, North Carolina, where there is a large population of white squirrels, which draws people in from around the world. So today, we're going to discover the world of the white squirrel with the director of the White Squirrel Institute, Katy Rosenbrg. So, Katy, everyone is familiar with a squirrel. If you've ever been to a city park or even down a neighborhood street, you've probably seen them popping around in the trees. However, white squirrels are very rare and are only known in a few different locations, including Brevard, North Carolina. But where else can people find white squirrels?
Well, they're growing in small quantities, but Mills River has a nice sized colony, Hendersonville, and Charlotte actually has some in North Carolina. Then in Kenton, Tennessee, the Northern Keys in Florida actually has some colonies. Tallahassee, Washington, D.C., Boston, Chesterfield, Missouri. So they're growing, and which is nice. I mean, it's always a nice surprise, and we're not sure how that's happening. If people are coming into, they see them in Brevard, if they're being trapped and taken out, or they're just obviously in the local areas expanding. So it's, so they're growing.
But most of those cities, Mills River, Hendersonville, Brevard, and Charlotte, are within reasonable distance of each other in North Carolina. How did the white squirrels get to places such as Florida and Washington, D.C.?
The story is the original white squirrels came from Florida. So I would understand that Florida connection. But I think my personal belief is people have come in and trapped them, or maybe they've been silent stowaways. But they are definitely, it would be interesting to find out how they got there. We don't absolutely know how some of the squirrels, they got to, Washington, D.C.
Well, then that would explain why you find them in Florida. But then how did they get to North Carolina if they're originally from the Sunshine State?
There's kind of a backstory there. A lady by the name of Barbara Mullangs, it was a gift from her uncle, who actually had been down in Florida, and he helped a gentleman named Mr. Black, who they were in his pecan orchard. So Barbara's uncle Harry was there and helped capture the squirrels. And Mr. Black said the squirrels had escaped from a circus. And so they left without their white squirrels. And so Mr. Black gave the squirrels to Uncle Harry. And then when Uncle Harry got back to Brevard, he gave them to his niece, Barbara. And so she raised the white squirrels, and they never reproduced while they were in captivity. But when they eventually got out, they started mating with the gray squirrels, and thus the population of the colony started and had grown to the size that it is today, or what we think it is today.
So since white squirrels are rare and they're abundant in Brevard, do you get white squirrel fans who come into town just to see them specifically?
We do. That's the number one question asked in the visitor center here in Brevard is, where can we see white squirrels? And it just so happens that outside their back door, they have a small colony living there. And then we have the best place to see them in Brevard is usually at the Brevard College. But for instance, I live outside city limits, and I have about 4 or 5 right now that are living and have nests around my property. But yeah, they just are fascinated with them. I mean, they're just a interesting, entertaining little animal. And they are a rarity. They are not common at all. So it is always a surprise when someone sees their first white squirrel, and they're just, because you don't see them. It's just that rare of an occasion. Now in Brevard, we see them all the time. So it's really, people who live here, it's not a big deal. But a visitor comes in, they see them. It's just that element of surprise that you don't expect, because that's not what you're used to. So I think that's why they're such a novelty to people.
So after someone sees their very first white squirrel with you, Is our very next question, is that an albino squirrel? Is that typically what you hear?
Albino squirrels are white with pink eyes or blue eyes, and they don't have any coloring on them whatsoever, whereas our squirrels, Brevard squirrels, do have patches of dark patches on them.
As exciting as it can be for a tourist to see a white squirrel for the first time, I'm sure that the residents of Brevard have called you at least once saying, I've got a white squirrel in my attic. Can you send someone over here to get him out?
See, I have never received a complaint about a white squirrel. I have about the gray squirrels, but I think because our white squirrels are so endearing that people probably just look past that. But I really haven't received that many complaints about them. But yes, they are a squirrel. They are a gray squirrel, so they can get into your attics. They can do all those little tricks that are their cousins do.
And just to be clear, yes, white squirrels are technically gray squirrels, but they have a specific gene that makes their coats white instead of gray. But let's get down to some hard numbers here. How many white squirrels really call Brevard, North Carolina home?
Well, and that's a great question, and that's one we hope to address in the near future. Back in the last time we did an official white squirrel count was 2011. And that was done through the Brevard College and Robert Glasner, who ran the White Squirrel, who actually started the White Squirrel Institute. And at that time, they estimated it to be about 1,000 white squirrels in the Brevard area. Now, and as I said, today we don't know, but they're just expanding outside of Brevard. So I want to say the population has probably maintained, depending on the years, goes up or down a little bit. But that's one thing in the future. We want to organize another white squirrel count and really get a handle on what kind of numbers we have.
Sounds like you have a thriving community of white squirrels, which must mean Brevard is perfect habitat for them. But what exactly is a habitat for a white squirrel? And as a matter of fact, what do they typically dine on?
Well, they have the same habitat as our eastern gray squirrels, and they like mature trees that have lots of nuts around, shelter trees around. They like oak, hickory, walnuts, elm, maple, and mulberry trees. But they also, and it's there's a name they call it nuts and acorns, which is a mast, is the staple of the squirrel's diet. But they also can feed on seeds and fruits, mushrooms, tea buds, and they occasionally will consume insects, small bird eggs, even young birds, but that's not the commonplace, but they have been known to do that. And then they bury their mast in the fall, which they rely on during the winter months when food is a lot more scarce for them.
Wait a second. Let's go back to them eating baby birds and bird eggs. Because just the other day, I learned that white-tailed deer do that as well. And now my world is completely turned upside down. We now have murderous squirrels in the trees.
Well, I have never seen that myself, but it's just in some of the research that we've done, it has happened. And I would assume that it occurs when they have no other food source and they're forced to go ahead and eat on something like that. And insects are probably a little bit more common, but I think, the bird eggs and even young birds is not that common of occurrence. I mean, they're going to probably stick to their vegetarian habits more. It's a little scary to have a bird-eating squirrel around.
Yeah, that's still just a bit creepy for me. I'm not going to sleep right tonight at all. But when we get back, we're going to lighten up this conversation a bit with the director of the White Squirrel Institute out of Brevard, North Carolina, Katy Rosenbrg. We're going to find out all about the white squirrel's romantic life.
Explore with RWD. We'll be right back after this.
Hey, Roger W. Downs here again, and if you didn't know this already, I'm a wildlife and landscape photographer. I love getting out into nature, taking photos, and then sharing those with you so you can be connected with God's artistry. And if you'd like to have one of those photos displayed in your space, I do sell them online. Visit RogerWDownsPhotography.com. That's RogerWDownsPhotography.com. You'll be able to find the link in the description of this podcast.
Welcome back to Explore with RWD.
What do you say we continue our conversation with Katy Rosenbrg, the director of the White Squirrel Institute out of Brevard, North Carolina, where there's a large population of the very rare white squirrel. So when it comes down to the romantic life of white squirrels, Katy, are they more about long-term commitments or are they more of an opportunity procreator?
They are more opportunistic. They make about twice a year. They'll do late winter and midsummer typically, and they do not mate for life. They're who's ever around, and the female goes into estrus for a very short time actually. So if there's male squirrels around, they'll go ahead and do their business and move on.
I'm assuming then that sort of strategy for the squirrels helps their numbers to grow. So they must be pretty abundant. Or are they on the endangered species list because they're still rare?
Well, they're not abundant because they are rare, but oddly enough, they are not on the endangered species list. And then here in Brevard, we also have an ordinance that is illegal to remove white squirrels. So they're protected, but they're not on any endangered species list.
Then I have to ask, what happens if you do get caught stealing a white squirrel? What are the fines associated with that?
Well, there is, to my knowledge, no one's ever been caught stealing a white squirrel. So I don't think a fine has ever been set on the records. So I don't know the question. That I don't even think there is one, to be honest with you. But there is an ordinance that you cannot steal white squirrels from Brevard.
I guess people may want to steal a squirrel, possibly to start their own population so they could start their own festival like Brevard does. And speaking of which, let's talk about the White Squirrel Festival. How did that get started?
Sure. Well, and as I said, we'll go back to around 1997. Robert Glasner, who started the White Squirrel Institute, was a professor at Brevard College. He was an associate professor of biology, and he set up a study project in which the white squirrel count was born. And he worked with a wildlife rehabilitator, Jennifer Bergman, who she was just an expert in white squirrels because she had rescued so many of them and had studied their traits and their habits and just everything you wanted to know about white squirrels. She was the go-to person, and she actually helped to mentor those students. And this went on, as I said, they started doing counts, I think, in 2003. I'd have to double check that. And then around 2005, the Heart of Brevard, Madrid Zimmerman at the time, got together with the professor, and they came up with a way of coming up or creating the festival that was not only, the focus on festival and help on music and helping the local economy, but also raising awareness of the white squirrel, Brevard white squirrels. And they saw that, it was an economic opportunity for them. So what they did, the Institute was involved with the festival by creating a booth, and you could go, at that time, you could do white squirrel tours where he would take you around the campus. And this is Robert would take you around the campus and educate you on the white squirrel and the habitats and what we're talking about today. And at that time, and then he also created the White Squirrel Adoption Program, which helps raise money for the squirrels. So that program is as long as the White Squirrel Festival has been around. So they just kind of have intertwined themselves. And the white squirrel, obviously, is our mascot. And then we got an official white squirrel mascot in 2011, and his name is Pisca Pete, who actually just retired on February 2nd as the official ambassador of Brevard. February 2nd is White Squirrel Day, and Pisca Pete would pick the Super Bowl winners and also predict on whether it was going to be a early or an early spring or late winter, just like Phil. Mm-hmm. And Pisca Pete's been pretty right on the entire time. And he passed the torch to his niece, Pisca Penny. So she is now the official ambassador for the town of Brevard.
Sounds to me like Pisca Pete has had a pretty long reign as the ambassador of Brevard. And by the way, he gets his name Pisca Pete from the neighboring Pisgah National Forest, which is a beautiful swath of natural forest, which is about 500,000 acres right there at the doorstep of Brevard, North Carolina. But how long do white squirrels live anyway, Katy?
In the wild, it's interesting. In the wild, we want to say 2 to 3 years, just because like wild squirrels, they're picked off by hawks, foxes, especially cats are a nuisance. And with white squirrels, because they are a little bit more visible, it's the same thing, 3 years. But in captivity, Piscopete is 11 years old, so that is really old for a squirrel. And so he's getting ready for. I mean, he is getting ready for a much deserved retirement. So yeah, they're not long lived in the wild. We'll just put it that way.
So with Pisgah did he get around quite a bit? I mean, did he go to other festivals? Did he hang out in downtown? I mean, was he at the coffee shop? I mean,
Piscopete, well, we did. He was used as educational purposes too. Way back in the day, Jennifer would do some work with the schools, and as he got older, it was more of being at the White Squirrel Festival. He had his own booth where people could come up and learn more about the white squirrels and the wildlife in Transylvania County, and people could take pictures up with him. And so it was always. And he has some huge fans too. I mean, every year we had a few folks that would come from a distance to see him every single year, and was very disappointed when the festival was canceled this past couple of years because they didn't get to see Piscopete. So we hope in the future that we can do something. Our home is located in the visitor center in Brevard, downtown Brevard, and we would like to work towards having a program, maybe monthly or quarterly, where we bring Piscopee in to meet the public on a Saturday, and so that might be kind of a fun program in the works. And they're wild animals. Piscopee, the reason why he was such a great ambassador is because the Institute got him, or I should say Jennifer, he had fallen out of a tree and actually suffered some brain damage. And the part of the brain that was affected was where his wildlife lived, his instincts lived. So he didn't realize he was a wild animal. And typically, squirrels do not make good pets. White squirrels, gray squirrels, because they're very bitey and their bites can hurt. And so he didn't have any of that. So he was very docile and you could hold him. And Piscopee actually she's lively. She's definitely lively, but she is not bitey either. So it is rare that you have a squirrel that you can handle safely without receiving a bite from him. And Piscopete he was stellar with people. And squirrels have big, long, old teeth. They can get very long, and when they sink those into you, it hurts, and it hurts really bad. So I receive at least one phone call a month from somebody who is looking to purchase a white squirrel for a pet, and they don't understand. A, we don't sell white squirrels, we rescue them, but B, squirrels are not good pets, and I can't stress that enough, that people shouldn't keep them as such. If they find a white squirrel or any squirrel, is to reach out to a rehabber and let them take over the care, so to allow them to be released back into the wild.
However, when you go to Brevard to visit the white squirrels, you can return home with one in your car. Well, kind of. Katy Rosenbrg will explain when we come back.
Don't wander off now. Explore with RWD will be right back after this.
Hey, Roger W. Downs here again, and if you didn't know this already, I'm a wildlife and landscape photographer. I love getting out into nature, taking photos, and then sharing those with you so you can be connected with God's artistry. And if you'd like to have one of those photos displayed in your space, I do sell them online. Visit RogerWDownsPhotography.com. That's RogerWDownsPhotography.com. You'll be able to find the link in the description of this podcast.
That wasn't too bad, now was it? Welcome back to Explore with RWD.
Now, before you freak out and say, what do you mean I can take a white squirrel home with me from Brevard? That's illegal. It's not good to have a wild animal inside my car or as a pet. Hold on, just calm down. I'm talking about a stuffed animal white squirrel, a replica that you'll receive when you adopt a wild white squirrel in Brevard. Katy explains.
We have different adoptions that you can do for the Institute on different levels. And I want to just say that all our adoptions monies raised go back towards the wildlife rehabbers we buy food. veterinarian costs, medicine supplies. So all those money raised goes right back into the program. But we have 3 different adoptions that we were offering, which was walnut, pecan, and an acorn adoption. And unfortunately, the acorn adoption and the pecan are out of stock. We have no more little white squirrels. Little stuffed white squirrels, which is a good thing. So we are just waiting for our suppliers to get them back in, and then we'll open up those adoptions. But we do have the walnut adoptions, which come with an official adoption certificate, a letter of introduction to your squirrel, a picture of your squirrel, and a lot of people buy them for gifts for people. And it makes a great gift while giving back to the wildlife in Transylvania County. If you're an avid squirrel watcher, and what's interesting about the white squirrels is they all have a very, their dorsal patterns, which are the dark spots in their heads. They're all different. They're all unique to each squirrel. So you're never, if you have a really great eye, you'll see white squirrels, but you'll be able to start noticing the difference in the patterning of the dorsal patch.
Now we have talked about rehabbing the squirrels. So can you talk a little bit more about what the White Squirrel Institute does for the population? Is there other projects you guys are involved in?
We, as I said, mainly our main one is the preservation, or our mission is the preservation and conservation of Brevard's white squirrel population and area wildlife as well. We we'll do reptiles, we'll do turtles, we'll do possums. We have rehabbers that actually, that's what they do. They specialize in those specific animals. And then what we do is we support the licensed wildlife rehabbers, as I said, by giving them money to help them. Because when we first started, at least when I came on as the director, I realized early on that most of the rehabbers, all the expenses were out of pocket. There was no program, no one was helping them. I mean, it was very limited in the early institute with the money that was raised. So the focus that I brought to the Institute was really raising some money that they didn't have to pay for it. Because as I said, for years, Sherry, our current rehabber, has been doing this since she's been like 16 years old. And it's all been out of pocket. So I think that, just to give them a little relief and know that they don't have to think twice if they need to take a squirrel to the vet because it's got a broken leg or it's sick or something. So that's a big part of what we do. And then, as I said, we would like to bring back the squirrel counts and get an idea on the population. And eventually, when the Institute grows a little bit, I'd love to do some educational programs.
Well, that'd be great, because I think it'd be kind of neat to learn more about white squirrels. But when it comes down to rehabbing them, how many squirrels do you typically have in rehab throughout the year, do you think?
We have, I won't give a number, but we have a significant amount of squirrels right now.
Okay.
And so, yeah, there is, and what happens, as I said, it's a 2-year process. So when you get in a baby squirrel, that squirrel has got to be bottle fed many times throughout the day. And then once they are weaned off the bottle, then they go into their first cage, and then they're inside for 9 months, depending on what the weather is. And then they're moved to an outside cage where they live. And then you start the slow release, which is where you take them out, you build a squirrel box, you let them out for a couple hours a day, and they always come back to their box, and then you take them in at night. And so this process, the longer they're outside on their own, and this is just gradually until they just don't come back, or they're living in their box. So yeah, it's a long process, and it's labor intensive for the rehabbers, but it's definitely a labor of love, and it's worth it.
So if someone wanted to become, let's say, a rehabber with you, is there a class or a course that they can take, or do they have to apprentice with someone else who's a rehabber? How would they go about that?
You actually have to apprentice, my understanding. There's a course that you can take. I just heard about one the other day, and I can post that out on the website when I'll get a link to their site. But then they ask you that you work with another rehabber, and I want to say a year is the length of time, and then you can get licensed as a wildlife rehabber. And it depends too, because there's some wildlife you need to have a rabies vaccination and a rabies certificate. Raccoons carry rabies, so you need specific licensing for those type of animals. With white squirrels, you don't. You can just do a standard wildlife rehabber license for squirrels.
Okay, so you have to be licensed to be able to do that. Like someone couldn't just come down there and be like, hey, I'll help.
Legally, you have to be licensed in order to work with wildlife, and those licenses vary depending on the wildlife that you're working with. So like deer have a different license from, say, somebody who's working with, as I said, raccoons. It just depends on the species.
But what if someone wanted to do more for the white squirrels than just make a monetary donation? Is there a way that they can get involved with the White Squirrel Institute and volunteer?
Yeah, so if they want to get involved, as I say, they can go out to our website and shoot us an email if they're interested in doing white squirrel counts. There's volunteerism. Sometimes it just depends on like our current rehabbers, how many animals they have with them. They can, if they're interested in like feeding or maybe cleaning cages. The one thing is, because we don't work out of a central location, all our rehabbers work out of their houses. So that's always, they'd have to be vetted by the rehabbers and the Institute. But if they're interested, they can just go ahead and send us an email through the contact form on the website, and we'll reach out to them.
And what is the address for your website?
It is whitesquirrelinstitute.org.
And so if someone wanted to plan a trip to come to Brevard to see the white squirrels, what would you suggest to them?
I would suggest that they start off at the visitor center, because we have a little white squirrel map there. It's a rack card, so they can tells you the best places to go see them. And the volunteers there are great, and they can give them other wonderful tips about what to do in town besides the white squirrels, and direct them. Give directions if they don't want the map. And it's just, it's a great starting point for your trip. And if anybody has a burning question, again, they can send me an email through the website, and we will do our best to answer it. And we try and respond within 24 hours.
Well, thank you very much, Katy, for sharing all about the white squirrels of Brevard. Again, Katy Rosenbrg, the director of the White Squirrel Institute. You can find the direct link to the Institute's website in the description of this podcast. And if you've enjoyed the Explore with RWD podcast, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up, or leave a nice little comment. And if you haven't liked it, please don't leave negative comments. You'll hurt my feelings. Again, I'm Roger W. Downs, a natural world photographer. You can visit my website where all my art is on display, and if you're interested in having it hang in your home, you can certainly purchase it there too at rogerwdownsphotography.com. And all of the websites that we discussed here today are in the description of this podcast. So please take a moment and visit the White Squirrel Institute's website, or plan your trip to Brevard. And look, if no one else has told you this yet today, I love you, and I know the good Lord above loves you. He has promised you that, and you are forgiven no matter what you've done. All you have to do is ask for forgiveness, and your sins are wiped away from you as far as the east is from the west. That is his promise to us. So until next time, peace, love, and coon dogs, y'all. Or maybe it should be white squirrels.
Thank you for listening. Visit us online at explorewithrwd.com to discover more about Roger, his photography, podcast, and adventures. Or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Explore with RWD. Remember, we didn't inherit the earth from our parents. We borrow it from our children. May God bless you and yours. Now get outside and go explore. Explore with RWD is produced by Downs Media Incorporated. All rights reserved.